I never thought I would be involved in a legal battle over the speed at which snow melts. But here I was, standing in my driveway in Boulder, Colorado, staring at a bright orange citation taped to my front door. My name is Connor Caldwell, and I had moved into the Ridgeview Estates subdivision 6 months earlier, thinking I had found the perfect place to settle down after my divorce. The neighborhood looked pristine with its cookie-cutter houses, manicured lawns, and mountain views that made the hefty mortgage almost bearable. What I did not realize was that I had just entered the domain of the most power-hungry homeowners association president in the entire state. The citation read, "Violation notice. Failure to remove snow from driveway and walkway within 48 hours of snowfall cessation. Fine, $500. Repeat violations will result in escalating penalties and potential legal action." I read it 3 times, convinced it was some kind of joke. The snowstorm had ended 2 days ago, sure, but my driveway was mostly clear. There were maybe a few patches of ice and some lingering snow on the shaded side, but nothing that warranted a $500 fine. I had shoveled for hours right after the storm, my back still aching from the effort. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the citation. A woman answered on the second ring with a tone that suggested I had already inconvenienced her. "Ridgeview Estates HOA, this is Brenda speaking." "Hi, yeah, I just got a citation for snow removal and I think there has been some mistake. I shoveled my driveway right after the storm." "Name and address," Connor Caldwell, 2847 Aspen Ridge Drive. I heard typing, then a dismissive sniff. "Our records show your property was inspected this morning at 7 a.m., and there was still substantial snow and ice present on your driveway and walkway." Substantial. There were a few patches of ice. It was literally 15 degrees this morning. Ice does not just disappear. According to HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4, all snow and ice must be completely removed within 48 hours. The inspection was conducted at the 48-hour and 15-minute mark. 15 minutes. You are fining me $500 because I was 15 minutes over. The rules are quite clear, Mr. Caldwell. If you wish to dispute this citation, you may request a hearing with the HOA board. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And what about the fine in the meantime? It is due within 7 days to avoid additional late fees. I hung up before I said something I would regret. $500 for ice that would have melted on its own within a few days once the temperature rose. I had bought into an HOA neighborhood thinking it would maintain property values and keep things orderly, not turn into some bizarre dictatorship where people measured snow melt with a stopwatch. The next day, I decided to do some investigating. I walked around the neighborhood during my lunch break, working remotely from home, and noticed something interesting. Several other driveways had just as much residual snow and ice as mine, if not more. The house 3 doors down had a solid sheet of ice covering half their driveway. 2 streets over, someone had not even shoveled at all, with snow piled up around their mailbox. I took photos of everything, documenting the addresses. If I was being fined, why were not these other residents getting citations too? The selective enforcement seemed suspicious. That evening, I attended the weekly HOA meeting, which was open to all residents. It was held in the community center, a bland beige building that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. About 20 people were scattered throughout the room when I arrived, most of them looking bored or irritated. At the front table sat 3 board members. In the center was a woman I immediately pegged as the president based on the way she surveyed the room like a queen inspecting her subjects. She was probably in her mid-50s, with severely highlighted blonde hair cut in an aggressive bob and wearing a pantsuit that screamed, "I would like to speak to the manager." Her name placard read Geraldine Pritchard, HOA president. Of course her name was Geraldine. It could not have been anything else. To her left was a timid-looking man named Marcus Chen, the treasurer, who kept his eyes down on a stack of papers. To her right sat a younger woman named Patricia Walters, the secretary, who seemed more interested in her phone than the proceedings. Geraldine called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of a gavel that seemed unnecessary in a room this small. She went through the standard agenda items, discussing landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, and upcoming holiday decorations guidelines. Every time someone tried to ask a question or make a suggestion, she shut them down with practiced efficiency. Finally, we reached the open forum section. I raised my hand. Geraldine looked at me with the expression of someone who had just discovered gum on their shoe. "Yes." Connor Caldwell, 2847 Aspen Ridge Drive. I received a citation yesterday for $500 for snow removal. I shoveled my driveway immediately after the storm, but I had some residual ice due to cold temperatures and shade. I have noticed several other properties in the neighborhood with similar or worse conditions that apparently have not been cited. Can you explain the discrepancy? Geraldine did not miss a beat. All violations are documented through our regular inspection process. If you believe you received a citation in error, you may submit a formal appeal in writing, which will be reviewed at the next monthly board meeting. That does not answer my question about selective enforcement. I have photos of at least 15 properties with worse snow coverage than mine. Mr. Caldwell, we conduct inspections systematically. If you would like to report violations you have observed, you may submit those through the proper channels as well. However, other properties' violations do not negate your own. But why was my property inspected at exactly the 48-hour and 15-minute mark? That seems oddly precise and almost like someone was waiting to catch me in violation. A flush crept up Geraldine's neck. Our inspection schedules are none of your concern. Now, if there are no other matters, I am not done. $500 is an excessive fine for a minor violation, especially one that occurred by mere minutes and was due to weather conditions beyond my control. I want to know who set these penalty amounts and when they were approved. Marcus, the treasurer, cleared his throat. The fine schedule was approved at a board meeting in September before you moved in, and were residents notified of these changes. It was posted on the community website and included in the monthly newsletter, Geraldine said, her tone clipped. I never received any newsletter. That is not our problem. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. I felt my jaw clench. I am not claiming ignorance. I am claiming the fine is punitive and unreasonable. Your opinion is noted. Next item. I sat down, seething. Around me, a few other residents gave me sympathetic looks, but no one spoke up in support. They all looked like beaten dogs, too afraid to challenge Geraldine's authority. After the meeting, an older man approached me in the parking lot. He was probably in his 70s, with kind eyes and a weathered face. Name is Harold Winchester. Been living here for 12 years, he said, extending his hand. You have got guts, kid. Most people just pay the fines and keep their heads down. This is insane. $500 for ice patches. Harold nodded grimly. Geraldine took over as president about 3 years ago. Before that, the HOA was pretty reasonable. Now she runs the place like her personal fiefdom. I have been fined for my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, for my mailbox being the wrong shade of black, for parking my car on the street for 20 minutes while I unloaded groceries. Why do not people vote her out? She has her supporters, mostly her friends who moved in around the same time she did. They always show up to vote as a block. The rest of us, we are either too tired to fight or afraid of retaliation. Retaliation. Oh yeah. You cross her, and suddenly your property is under constant inspection. You will get cited for things you did not even know could be violations. She made one guy repaint his house twice because she kept claiming the color was not the approved shade, even though he had it color matched to the HOA paint samples. Cost him thousands. That cannot be legal, Harold shrugged. Probably not, but who has the money and energy to fight it? Most of us are just trying to live our lives. I drove home that night furious. I had bought into this neighborhood thinking it would be a peaceful place to rebuild my life after the divorce. Instead, I was dealing with a petty tyrant who got her kicks from harassing residents over technicalities. The next morning, I received another citation. This one was for unauthorized driveway staining. Apparently, the salt I had used to melt the ice had left some white residue on the concrete, which violated the aesthetic standards outlined in Section 19 of the HOA bylaws. Another $300. I stood in my driveway, staring at the barely visible salt stains, and something snapped. I was not going to take this anymore. If Geraldine wanted to play games, I would play right back. First, I needed to understand the rules better than she did. I spent the entire weekend reading every single page of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The document was 147 pages of dense legal text, clearly written by lawyers who charged by the word. But buried in all that bureaucratic nonsense, I found some interesting information. Section 43 dealt with property modifications and improvements. It stated that any changes to the external appearance of a property required HOA approval. However, it also included a clause that exempted seasonal decorations and temporary modifications lasting less than 60 days. Section 12, the snow removal section that had gotten me into this mess, required that driveways and walkways be clear and safe within 48 hours. But it did not specify exactly what clear meant or what methods could be used to achieve it. An idea started forming in my mind. It was petty, it was ridiculous, but it might just work. I went to the hardware store and bought 10 gallons of black concrete paint and a paint roller. If Geraldine wanted to fine me for snow melting too slow, I would make sure the snow melted faster. Basic physics. Dark surfaces absorb more heat than light surfaces. If my driveway was black instead of the standard light gray concrete, the snow would melt much quicker. On Monday morning, I started painting. The concrete paint went on smoothly, turning my light gray driveway into a glossy black surface. My next-door neighbor, a woman in her 40s named Jennifer, came out to watch. "What are you doing?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Solving a problem," I said, rolling another stripe of black paint. "Is this about the citations?" $500 for ice patches, Jennifer. $500. She winced. "Yeah, I got one last year for my lawn being brown during a drought. $200. Did you fight it?" "No, I just paid it. Did not want the hassle." Well, I am done being hassled. It took me most of the day, but by evening my entire driveway was black. It looked different from every other driveway in the neighborhood, but I did not care. I was making a point. The next morning I found Geraldine standing in front of my house, arms crossed, staring at my newly painted driveway. Her face was the color of a ripe tomato. "What have you done?" she demanded as I walked outside with my coffee. "Good morning, Geraldine. I painted my driveway. Problem." "You painted your driveway black without HOA approval. That is a clear violation." "Actually, it is not. I checked the bylaws. Section 43 exempts temporary modifications lasting less than 60 days. This is temporary paint that will need to be redone regularly anyway. Totally within the rules, her eye twitched. This is not what that clause is intended for. Intent does not matter. Rules are rules, right? That is what you told me at the meeting. This is an eyesore. It ruins the aesthetic uniformity of the neighborhood. You know what is an eyesore? Snow and ice on driveways. But do not worry, that would not be a problem anymore. Black absorbs more heat, so any snow that falls on my driveway will melt much faster. I am just being proactive about compliance. You cannot do this. I already did. And according to the bylaws, I can keep it this way for up to 60 days before it is no longer considered temporary. After that, I will just repaint it, call it seasonal maintenance. Geraldine looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. We will see about that, she hissed, then stormed off to her car. I went inside feeling pretty pleased with myself. Sure, it was petty, but sometimes you have to fight petty with petty. The satisfaction lasted about 3 hours. Then I got a certified letter from the HOA's attorney demanding that I restore my driveway to its original color within 72 hours or face daily fines of $100 plus legal fees. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Robert Chen, Marcus the treasurer's brother, which I learned later was a small world coincidence. Robert specialized in HOA disputes and agreed to meet with me the next day. His office was in downtown Boulder, a modest space filled with law books and files. Robert himself was in his mid-40s, sharp-eyed and direct. "So you painted your driveway black to make snow melt faster," he said after I explained the situation. "Basically, yes. And you are citing the temporary modification clause as justification." "Correct." Robert leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk. "It is creative, I will give you that. The problem is, HOA boards have pretty broad discretion in interpreting their own rules. If they claim your modification is not what was intended by that clause, a judge might agree with them. But the rule does not specify what kinds of temporary modifications are allowed. It just says temporary modifications under 60 days do not require approval. True. But you also have to consider whether this is a hill you want to die on. Legal fees can add up quickly. Even if you win, you might spend thousands getting there. So you are saying I should just give in, let them bully me into paying ridiculous fines. I am saying you need to think strategically. What is your actual goal here? I sat back, considering. I want them to stop harassing residents with excessive fines over minor violations. I want some accountability for selective enforcement. And honestly, I want Geraldine to stop acting like she owns the neighborhood. Robert nodded. Those are bigger goals than just a painted driveway. If you want to achieve them, you need to think bigger too. What do you suggest? Well, first, we should respond to their attorney's letter. I can draft something arguing that your modification falls within the allowed parameters. That will buy you some time. Second, you should start documenting everything. Every citation, every inspection, every interaction with the board. If you can prove selective enforcement or harassment, you might have grounds for a lawsuit. You think it will come to that, based on what you have told me about Geraldine? Yeah, probably. I hired Robert on the spot. He was not cheap at $300 an hour, but I was in too deep to back out now. Besides, this had stopped being about just me. If Geraldine had been treating me this way, she had definitely been doing it to others. Robert sent his response to the HOA's attorney the next day. It was a masterpiece of legalese, basically saying, "Try me in the most professional way possible." The letter argued that the temporary modification clause was intentionally broad to allow residents flexibility, and that my painted driveway met all the stated criteria. For a few days, things were quiet. Then the snow came. Colorado in January can be unpredictable, and we got hit with a surprise storm that dumped 8 inches overnight. I woke up at 5 a.m. and went outside to shovel, but I also wanted to test my theory about the black driveway. I shoveled a path down the center but left snow on both sides of the driveway. Then I waited. By noon, the sun was out, and the temperature had climbed to 35 degrees. The snow on my black driveway was melting noticeably faster than the snow on my neighbor's standard gray concrete. By 3 p.m., my driveway was almost completely clear except for a few wet patches, while everyone else still had several inches of snow. I took photos documenting everything. This was perfect evidence that my modification served a legitimate purpose. Geraldine drove by twice that afternoon, slowing down to glare at my clear driveway. I waved cheerfully from my front window. That evening I got a call from Harold Winchester. "Connor, you have become the talk of the neighborhood," he said, chuckling. "Everyone is talking about your black driveway and how Geraldine is losing her mind over it. Good. Maybe it will inspire other people to stand up to her. Actually, that is why I am calling. A few of us are getting together tomorrow night, people who are fed up with the HOA's nonsense. We would like you to join us. What are you planning? Just talking for now, but if we can organize enough people, maybe we can force some changes. Vote out the current board, amend some of these ridiculous rules. Count me in." The meeting was held at Harold's house, a cozy ranch-style home filled with family photos and the smell of fresh coffee. 8 other residents showed up, all with their own horror stories about Geraldine and the HOA board. Jennifer from next door was there. She had been fined over $2,000 in the past year for various minor violations, including having her garbage cans visible from the street for 30 minutes after pickup time. A younger couple, Derek and Amanda Patterson, had been cited for their children's toys being in the front yard. The fine was $700. An elderly woman named Ruth Sanderson had been threatened with a lien on her house because she was late paying a fine for her rose bushes being insufficiently manicured. Everyone had similar stories of selective enforcement, excessive fines, and Geraldine's vindictive behavior toward anyone who questioned her authority. "We need to organize a recall election," Derek said. "The bylaws allow for it if we can get 20% of residents to sign a petition." "How many residents is that?" I asked. Harold pulled out a spreadsheet. "There are 235 homes in Ridgeview Estates. We would need 47 signatures." "That seems doable." "The problem is people are afraid," Ruth said quietly. "They do not want to put their names on something that might make them a target." "They are already targets," I said. "Geraldine does not need a reason to harass people. She does it because she can." "Connor is right," Jennifer added. "I've kept my head down and paid every fine without complaint, and I still get cited constantly. There is no winning with her unless we fight back collectively." We spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Derek and Amanda volunteered to draft the recall petition. Harold would use his connections as a long-time resident to reach out to people privately. Jennifer and I would create a website documenting HOA abuses and providing information about residents' rights. It felt good to be doing something proactive, instead of just reacting to Geraldine's attacks. The next week, I received another certified letter. This one was not from the HOA's attorney but from Geraldine herself, on official HOA letterhead. It informed me that I was banned from using the community pool, gym, and clubhouse until I returned my property to compliance with community standards. I forwarded the letter to Robert immediately. "Can she do this?" I asked when he called me back. Technically, no. You have paid your HOA dues, which entitle you to use the common facilities. She cannot ban you without following proper procedures, which would include a hearing and a vote by the full board. This is just her overstepping her authority again. So what do? We add it to the list. Keep documenting everything. The more overreach we can prove, the stronger our case gets. The recall petition was officially filed the following week. Derek and Amanda had done an amazing job drafting it, clearly outlining the reasons for the recall: excessive fines, selective enforcement, harassment of residents, and abuse of authority. Within 3 days, we had the required 47 signatures. By the end of the week, we had 73. Geraldine called an emergency HOA board meeting in response. I attended, along with about 50 other residents, far more than had ever shown up before. The community center was packed. Geraldine stood at the front table, her face tight with barely controlled anger. Marcus and Patricia flanked her, both looking uncomfortable. This meeting has been called to address a petition that has been circulating through our community, Geraldine began. A petition based on false accusations and lies spread by a small group of troublemakers who refuse to follow the rules. 73 signatures is not a small group, Derek called out from the audience. You do not have the floor, Geraldine snapped. This board has worked tirelessly to maintain the standards and property values of this neighborhood. We have enforced the rules fairly and consistently, rules that every resident agreed to when they purchased their homes. That is not true, Ruth said, standing up. Her voice wavered but held firm. I have lived here for 15 years. Under previous boards, the HOA was reasonable and worked with residents. Under your leadership, it has become hostile and punitive. Miss Sanderson, you are out of order. No, you are out of order. Jennifer stood up too. You have turned this neighborhood into a police state where people are afraid to even put their trash cans out early. You fine people for things that are not even violations, just because you do not like them. More people started standing, voicing their own complaints. The room erupted in chaos, with residents shouting about fines, harassment, and Geraldine's abuse of power. Geraldine banged her gavel repeatedly, her face now purple. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone out. You cannot adjourn a meeting just because you do not like what people are saying, I said, my voice carrying across the room. Everyone quieted down to hear. The bylaws are clear. Once a recall petition meets the signature threshold, a special election must be scheduled within 30 days. You do not get to ignore that just because you are angry. Geraldine fixed me with a look of pure hatred. This is all your fault. You moved in here and started causing trouble from day one with your entitled attitude and your ridiculous painted driveway. I started causing trouble. You fined me $500 for ice melting. You created this situation. You think you are so clever, do not you? Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Caldwell. I have dealt with people like you before. You will not win. This is not about winning, I said. It is about treating residents fairly and following your own rules, something you have clearly forgotten how to do. Marcus cleared his throat. Geraldine, maybe we should take a break and reconvene once everyone has calmed down. Shut up, Marcus, she hissed. That was apparently the last straw for Marcus. His eyes widened and he stood up. No, I am done shutting up. Connor is right. We have been running this HOA like a dictatorship. I went along with it because I did not want the conflict, but I cannot do it anymore. These fines are excessive. The enforcement is selective, and you have been retaliating against anyone who questions you. Patricia nodded slowly. I agree, this has gone too far. Geraldine looked between her two board members, betrayed. You are both fired. You cannot fire us, Marcus said. We are elected positions. Then I want your resignations." "No." The room watched this standoff with fascination. Geraldine, realizing she had lost control completely, grabbed her purse and stormed out of the community center. Through the windows, we could see her peel out of the parking lot in her white Lexus. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, looking exhausted. "Okay. Well, I guess I am running this meeting now. As treasurer and now acting president, I am officially acknowledging receipt of the recall petition. Per the bylaws, we will schedule a special election for 3 weeks from today. All board positions will be on the ballot. In the meantime, all pending fines and enforcement actions are suspended pending review." The room erupted in applause. Over the next 3 weeks, the neighborhood transformed. Without the constant threat of citations hanging over everyone's heads, people actually started talking to each other, organizing candidates for the board election, and reviewing the HOA's finances and operations. What we found was disturbing. Marcus, once freed from Geraldine's control, opened the books completely. It turned out that the excessive fines had been Geraldine's idea, implemented without proper resident notification or vote. She had been collecting tens of thousands of dollars in fines each month, far more than was needed for neighborhood maintenance and operations. Even more concerning, large chunks of money had been spent on things that had no clear benefit to the community. $30,000 paid to Geraldine's brother's landscaping company for work that was never done. $20,000 for consulting fees paid to a company that did not seem to exist when we tried to look it up. $15,000 for legal expenses that did not match the actual invoices from the HOA's attorney. "I think she has been embezzling," Marcus told the investigative committee we had formed. I tried to question some of these expenses before, but she always had explanations, and I did not want to push too hard. "We need to report this," Derek said. "This is fraud." We contacted the Boulder County District Attorney's Office and submitted all the financial records Marcus had pulled. They assigned an investigator, Detective Lisa Morrison, who took the case seriously. Geraldine, meanwhile, had gone silent. She stopped responding to emails, did not show up to the scheduled election debate, and her house sat dark most nights. Rumor had it she was consulting with lawyers. The election itself was a landslide. Harold Winchester was elected president. Derek Patterson became vice president. Jennifer became treasurer. A retired accountant named Frank Reynolds took the secretary position. All four ran on a platform of transparency, reasonable enforcement, and amending the most egregious rules. On their first day in office, the new board voted unanimously to forgive all outstanding fines issued under Geraldine's administration, and to refund fines paid within the past year. I got back my $800, plus a formal apology. They also voted to allow my black driveway permanently, amending the rules to permit residents to paint their driveways any color from an approved palette, including black for the specific purpose of accelerating snow melt. Things seemed to be wrapping up nicely. Then Detective Morrison called me. "Mr. Caldwell, we have completed our investigation into Geraldine Pritchard's management of the HOA finances. I wanted to give you a heads up since you were instrumental in bringing this to our attention. We are filing criminal charges tomorrow." "What charges?" "Embezzlement, fraud, theft by deception. We have traced over $120,000 that she diverted from HOA accounts to her personal use over the past 3 years. The fake invoices, the payments to her brother for work that was never done, even some of the fines she collected never made it into the HOA accounts. She was just pocketing the cash. Holy shit. Yeah, we will be arresting her tomorrow morning. I wanted you to know in case she tries to contact you or retaliate in any way. If she does, call me immediately." Geraldine did not contact me. Instead, she tried to run. Detective Morrison called me the next afternoon to tell me that when they went to arrest her that morning, she was loading suitcases into her car. They found $60,000 in cash packed in a bag, along with fake IDs and a plane ticket to Mexico City. Fleeing before arrest added additional charges. Her bail was set at $500,000, which she could not post. She sat in county jail awaiting trial. The story made local news. Former HOA president arrested for embezzlement ran in the Boulder Daily Camera, complete with Geraldine's scowling mugshot. The comments section was full of current and former Ridgeview Estates residents sharing their own stories of her abuses. The new HOA board hired a forensic accountant to fully untangle the finances. It turned out Geraldine had stolen even more than initially suspected, closer to $200,000 total. The HOA filed a civil lawsuit against her to recover the funds, though the attorney told us we probably would not see most of it since Geraldine had spent it on luxury goods, vacations, and who knows what else. Her husband, a quiet man named Donald who had always seemed embarrassed by his wife's behavior, filed for divorce within a week of her arrest. I felt a little bad for him. He had probably been a victim of her controlling behavior too. The criminal trial took several months to work through the system. Geraldine's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office was not interested. They had her dead to rights on multiple counts, and with the attempted flight, they were pushing for the maximum sentence. I attended the trial on the days when I could get away from work. It was fascinating and infuriating to watch all the evidence laid out. Bank records showing transfers from the HOA account to her personal accounts. Fake invoices she had created using her brother's company letterhead. Testimony from residents about fines they had paid in cash that never appeared in the HOA records. Her brother was also charged as an accomplice. He claimed he did not know what Geraldine was doing, but the prosecution proved he had signed off on invoices for work he knew was never completed. He took a plea deal and agreed to testify against his sister. The most damning moment came when the prosecutor showed the jury photos of Geraldine's lifestyle improvements over the past 3 years. A new Lexus, a swimming pool installed at her house, a vacation home in Vail purchased for cash. All funded with stolen HOA money, while she was simultaneously hitting residents with excessive fines for minor violations. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. He noted that Geraldine had been in a position of trust, that she had stolen from her own neighbors, and that she had shown no remorse. He sentenced her to 8 years in state prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus penalties and interest. 8 years. It seemed like a lot. But then I thought about all the people she had harassed, all the money she had stolen, all the stress and misery she had caused. Maybe it was appropriate after all. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, or at least a better version of normal. The new board streamlined the rules, eliminating the most petty and burdensome requirements. They established a clear fine schedule with much lower penalties, and a focus on working with residents to fix problems rather than punishing them. They also implemented transparency measures. All board meetings were now recorded and posted online. Financial statements were published monthly. Any fine over $100 required approval from the full board, not just the president. Property values actually increased after the changes. Turns out people preferred living in neighborhoods where they would not be harassed by power-hungry HOA boards. My black driveway became something of a neighborhood landmark. Other people started painting their driveways too. some black, some dark gray, some dark blue. The new board approved them all. In winter, our street had the clearest driveways in Boulder, with snow melting faster thanks to the heat absorption of the dark surfaces. Harold turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He ran the organization with common sense and compassion, treating residents like neighbors instead of subjects. The meetings were productive and drama-free. People actually volunteered for committees instead of avoiding HOA involvement like the plague. Jennifer became one of my closest friends. We often joked about how we had bonded over HOA oppression. She hosted a block party that summer, the first real community gathering that did not feel forced or awkward. Nearly everyone showed up, including some people I had never seen at any HOA event before. Ruth Sanderson's rose bushes grew wild and beautiful, free from the threat of being deemed insufficiently manicured. She won a neighborhood garden competition the new board organized, purely for fun with no enforcement consequences. Derek and Amanda's kids played in their front yard without fear. Their toys scattered across the lawn in the chaotic way that means children are having a good childhood. As for me, I finally felt like I actually lived in my house rather than just occupying it under sufferance from some petty dictator. I started dating again, something I had not felt comfortable doing while dealing with HOA stress. I met a woman named Grace Burton at a coffee shop downtown. She thought the black driveway story was hilarious and loved that I had stood up to bullying. Grace was a graphic designer, creative and easygoing, pretty much the opposite of Geraldine in every way. We took it slow, but it felt right. She eventually moved in with me, joking that she needed to see this famous black driveway for herself before committing. One evening about a year after Geraldine's conviction, I was grilling in my backyard when Harold came over with a beer for each of us. "Wanted to thank you again," he said, settling into one of my patio chairs. "For starting this whole thing. I know it cost you a lot of money and stress." "Worth it," I said, flipping burgers. Though I never imagined painting my driveway black would lead to someone getting arrested for embezzlement. Harold laughed. "Life is funny that way. You were just trying to make your snow melt faster and avoid ridiculous fines. That too. But seriously, you inspired a lot of people to stand up. This neighborhood is so much better now." It was true. Walking around Ridgeview Estates these days felt completely different. People actually waved and said hello. Kids played outside. Nobody obsessively measured their grass or panicked if they forgot to bring in their trash cans immediately after pickup. The HOA still existed and still enforced rules, but reasonably. They addressed actual problems like dangerous tree branches or major property deterioration, not nitpicking nonsense like mailbox colors or snow melting speeds. Marcus Chen, the former treasurer, became a good friend too. He had been racked with guilt about not standing up to Geraldine sooner, but I reminded him that it took courage to finally break away, especially in public like he did. He was dating Patricia now, the former secretary. They seemed happy. Geraldine's house sold at a steep discount, the real estate listing carefully avoiding any mention of the previous owner. A nice family from Denver bought it, parents with 2 kids and a golden retriever. They fit into the neighborhood perfectly. Sometimes I wondered if Geraldine, sitting in a prison cell somewhere, ever reflected on how she had destroyed her own life through pettiness and greed. She could have been a good HOA president if she had actually cared about the community instead of power and money. But people like her rarely have that kind of self-awareness. The fake company she had created for funneling embezzled funds turned out to be registered in her maiden name, Geraldine Pritchard. The paper trail was almost comically obvious once investigators started looking. She had not even been good at being a criminal, just audacious enough that nobody had questioned her until it was too late. Her brother ended up serving 18 months and paid a hefty fine. He lost his legitimate landscaping business in the process. I felt slightly bad about that, but he had participated in the fraud knowingly. Actions have consequences. Grace and I got engaged the following spring. We held the engagement party at my house, naturally, with the entire neighborhood invited. Someone made a joke about the black driveway being where we would dance, and we actually did end up setting up tables and lights in the driveway for the party. It was a beautiful evening, the mountains visible in the distance, neighbors who had become genuine friends laughing and celebrating with us. Harold gave a toast about how our neighborhood had transformed from a place of fear and petness into a real community, and he credited me with starting that change. I disagreed. I told everyone that night that it was not one person. It was all of us deciding we had had enough of being pushed around. I just happened to be stubborn enough and annoyed enough to paint my driveway black, which lit the fuse. To black driveways and faster snow melting, Derek called out, raising his glass. To reasonable HOA boards, Jennifer added. To standing up to bullies, Ruth said quietly, and everyone cheered. The wedding was 6 months later, a small ceremony in our backyard. Grace looked stunning, and the weather cooperated perfectly. We had debated doing something bigger or fancier, but we both agreed we just wanted to be surrounded by people who mattered. The new HOA board approved our ceremony without any hassle. No forms required or fees charged, just a genuine congratulations and offer to help with anything we needed. That is what an HOA should be, I thought. Helpful neighbors, not bureaucratic tyrants. Marcus officiated since he had gotten ordained online. His ceremony was funny and heartfelt, mentioning how Grace and I had found each other partly because I was stubborn enough to fight City Hall, or in this case, HOA hell. Love is a lot like Connor's driveway, Marcus said during the ceremony. Sometimes it needs a dramatic change to work properly. Sometimes you have to do something that seems crazy to other people but makes perfect sense to you. And sometimes the best relationships are forged in the heat of conflict, melting away the old and clearing the path for something better. It was a weird metaphor, but somehow it worked. Everyone laughed and cheered. Our first winter as a married couple brought heavy snows. Colorado had one of its biggest years in decades, with storm after storm rolling through. My black driveway performed exactly as intended, melting snow significantly faster than standard concrete. Other black driveways throughout the neighborhood did the same. Grace and I stood at our front window one morning after a particularly heavy overnight snow, drinking coffee and watching our driveway already starting to clear while our neighbors were still shoveling. "You know what is funny?" Grace said. "Geraldine did you a favor in a weird way." "How do you figure?" "If she had not been so unreasonable, you never would have painted the driveway. You never would have fought back. The whole neighborhood might still be suffering under her reign. And we might not have met because you would have been too stressed and unhappy to be going out to coffee shops." She had a point. Sometimes the worst situations force us to become our best selves, or at least force us to do creative things with paint and physics. I got a letter about 2 years after Geraldine went to prison. It was forwarded through Robert Chen, my attorney, who had screened it first to make sure it was not some kind of harassment or threat. It was from Geraldine. A short letter, handwritten on prison stationery. "Mr. Caldwell," it began. No greeting, no pleasantries. "I am writing because my therapist suggested I make amends to people I have harmed. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize my behavior was wrong. I let power go to my head. I justified increasingly unethical actions by telling myself I was maintaining standards and property values. The truth is, I was stealing and bullying people to feed my own ego and greed. Your black driveway made me irrationally angry because it represented someone not bowing to my authority. I responded by trying to destroy you rather than examining my own actions. I am sorry for the stress and expense I caused you and everyone else in Ridgeview Estates. I have a lot of time here to think about the person I became. I hope you and the neighborhood are doing better without me. Geraldine Pritchard. I read the letter twice, then showed it to Grace. You believe it? She asked. I do not know. Maybe. Prison changes people sometimes. Or maybe her therapist told her remorse letters look good for parole hearings. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I decided not to. Geraldine did not need my forgiveness to move forward with her life, and I did not need to give it to move forward with mine. The letter was enough, an acknowledgement that she knew what she had done was wrong. I filed it away and decided not to think about Geraldine anymore. She had taken up enough space in my life already, years past. Grace and I had our first child, a daughter we named Claire. The neighborhood rallied around us with meals, baby gifts, and offers to help. The HOA even organized a neighborhood baby shower at the community center, something that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. Claire learned to walk on our black driveway, taking her first stumbling steps while Grace and I hovered nearby. The neighborhood kids played together constantly, riding bikes and drawing with chalk, and just being kids without worrying about HOA citations. Harold served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down, passing leadership to a younger couple who maintained the same reasonable, community-focused approach. The culture had fundamentally shifted. Being on the HOA board was now seen as a service role, not a power position. I kept my black driveway, repainting it every few years as needed. It became something of a symbol, a reminder that sometimes you have to do something a little crazy to stand up for what is right. New residents always asked about it, and I would tell them the story, usually abbreviated and focused on the humor rather than the stress. One winter evening, about 5 years after the whole ordeal started, I was outside shoveling the few inches of snow that had accumulated on the driveway. The sun was setting, painting the mountains pink and orange. Inside, I could see Grace through the window playing with Claire. Our home, our life, our community. A car pulled up and an older couple got out. They approached cautiously. "Excuse me," the man said. "We are thinking about buying a house 2 streets over. Are you Connor Caldwell?" "I am." "Can I help you?" The realtor told us about you and your black driveway and about what happened with the previous HOA board. We wanted to meet you and see if this neighborhood is really as good as she claims. I leaned on my shovel, smiling. "What do you want to know? Is the HOA reasonable? We have been burned by nightmare boards before. We almost did not want to look at HOA neighborhoods anymore." I understand completely. I felt the same way after my experience. But yeah, the HOA here is great now. Transparent, fair, focused on actual community needs. No petty nonsense. The woman nodded, relief evident on her face. "That is so good to hear. And your driveway, it really helps with snow." "Absolutely. Basic physics. Dark surfaces absorb more heat. In the winter, my driveway clears faster than anyone's. It has also become kind of a neighborhood symbol for standing up to unreasonable authority." The couple laughed. "We love that. Thank you for your time. I think we are going to make an offer on the house." They drove away, and I finished shoveling, thinking about how strange life could be. I had painted my driveway black out of spite and frustration, a petty response to a petty tyrant. But that action had cascaded into something much bigger, transforming an entire community and landing a criminal in prison. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance ripple outward in ways you cannot predict. Sometimes painting your driveway black is exactly the right thing to do, even if it seems ridiculous at the time. I went inside to my family, to the life I had built in this neighborhood that had become a true home. Grace looked up from where she was reading to Claire. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything is perfect," I said, and I meant it. The black driveway remained, a monument to the idea that rules should serve people, not the other way around. That authority should be questioned when it becomes tyrannical. That communities are stronger when people stand together against bullying and abuse. And most importantly, that's sometimes the best way to solve a problem with snow melting too slow, is to do something unexpected, creative, and just a little bit defiant. Geraldine eventually got out on parole after serving 5 years. I heard she moved to another state, leaving Colorado entirely. I hoped she had actually learned something from her experience, though I had no way of knowing. She was not my problem anymore. Life in Ridgeview Estates continued peacefully. More people painted their driveways black or dark colors, forming what we jokingly called the resistance block. Every winter, our section of the neighborhood had the clearest streets and driveways. Claire grew into a curious, confident toddler, full of questions and energy. She loved playing outside, completely unaware that her front yard had once been the subject of HOA tyranny. That was how it should be. Children should not grow up afraid of their own neighborhood organization. Sometimes I gave talks at other HOA meetings around Boulder, invited by residents dealing with their own problem boards. I would tell my story, explain the steps we took to organize and push for change, and emphasize the importance of documentation and collective action. "One person fighting alone rarely wins," I would tell them. "But organized residents standing together are powerful. HOAs derive their authority from the homeowners. Never forget that. You have more power than you think." My black driveway story became somewhat legendary in local HOA reform circles. News articles referenced it. Reform advocates used it as an example of creative resistance. I even got contacted by a podcast about weird neighbor disputes, though I declined to appear. I was done with my 15 minutes of fame. Robert Chen, my attorney, became something of a specialist in HOA disputes. My case had given him valuable experience and publicity, and he now represented dozens of homeowners dealing with similar issues. We stayed friends, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss his latest cases. "You started something," he told me once. "HOA reform was always happening, but your case put a spotlight on the issue. More people are willing to fight back now. I just painted my driveway. You did more than that. You stood up when it was expensive and difficult. You inspired others to do the same. That matters." Maybe he was right. Or maybe I was just a stubborn guy who got annoyed about a stupid fine and decided to make a point. Either way, the outcome was positive. Grace launched a small business from home, doing graphic design work for local companies. The flexible schedule let her be with Claire while still pursuing her career. I continued working remotely in software development, grateful every day that I did not have to commute. We had everything we needed. A home we loved, a neighborhood that functioned like a community should, friends we cared about, and a family that brought us joy. The black driveway served its practical purpose every winter and its symbolic purpose year-round. Sometimes I thought about that first day, standing in my driveway reading that ridiculous citation for $500. If someone had told me then how it would all play out, the investigations and trials and neighborhood transformation, I never would have believed them. But life rarely goes the way you expect. The key is responding to challenges with creativity and courage rather than just accepting injustice because fighting seems too hard. That is what I did, intentionally or not, and it changed everything. My black driveway still stands as a testament to that principle. Every winter when the snow falls and melts faster on the dark surface, I am reminded that solutions to problems often come from thinking differently. That rules should make sense. That authority figures need accountability. That communities thrive when people care more about each other than about petty enforcement. Geraldine taught me all those lessons, though not in the way she intended. Her tyranny and greed accidentally created a better neighborhood by provoking resistance. In that sense, maybe I should thank her, though I never will. Instead, I will keep living my life, raising my daughter, loving my wife, and maintaining my wonderfully practical, symbolic, defiant black driveway. And every time someone new moves to Ridgeview Estates and asks about it, I will tell them the story, keeping alive the memory of how a community came together to demand better. Because that is a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing on. Not for my sake, but for everyone who has ever felt powerless against bureaucratic bullying and wondered if fighting back was worth it. It is worth it. It is always worth it. Even if you start with nothing but a can of black paint and a stubborn refusal to accept injustice. Especially then.